everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Why I Love Flagler County, your local podcast spotlighting local businesses and local residents on why they like being in Flagler County. So today I'm super excited to have my guest, Becca, here today. Becca, thank you so much for the time today. I really
Hi.
appreciate it. Great. Well, I'll let you kind of tell a bit, but you own a great bake shop down in Bunnell, which is my friend Rachel talked about on the podcast not too long ago, a few days ago. She's like, "You guys have to go to Bunnell. It's a super great place." And I was like, "I would love to talk to her because I don't think Rachel mentioned, but I'm a huge baker. So this is a
Oh,
super fun topic for me to talk
awesome.
about.
Awesome.
I just made macaroons for my local church group, and they loved it. It was like snowman, strawberry cheesecake.
Fun.
So yeah, so I really love this. I'm super excited for this. So I would love for you to tell just a little bit about your story. Like what brought you down here to Palm Coast?
Well, initially I came here. I've been here over 14 years now. So I came down here at the end of 2009 and I came for a job like so many people. In 2008, when the economy crashed, I got laid off from my job and I spent several months unemployed, unable to find anything where I lived. And I actually have been to Palm Coast several times prior to that. When I worked for Michael's, the craft store, and I worked as a setup coordinator. So I actually set up the Michael's here in town. So I was here in 2007 when that was all being built.
Wow.
And in 2009, while I was unemployed, I was still kind of friends with the management there. And they're like, you can't find a job, just come down here. We'll give you a job. And I said, oh, well, after 8 months of having no luck, I was like, okay, I guess I'm moving to Florida. So which is nothing new for me. I've always been somebody who kind of like, I'll just pick up and move, and that's never been a big deal to me. I enjoy a change of scenery, just kind of going new places, and but this is the longest ever any I've lived anywhere ever in my entire life. I've never lived anywhere this long, like not even as a child. So I guess I like it here. My family is all still in Minnesota, so they're not super happy that I haven't moved back, but I think they understand.
They should. Oh, that's crazy. I'm from Michigan, so I know that
Okay.
that weather, once you leave it, it's hard to go back.
I
It's a
go back
hard
for
sell.
like Christmas. I like the
That's
snow at
nice.
Christmas time,
Yeah.
and then I'm done. I'm done with it.
It's your little winter holiday
Yep.
vacation. Oh, that's so funny. Also when you said 2009 was 14 years ago, I was like, oh my God.
I know,
It's
right? It
like
doesn't seem like that's
I thought it
possible.
was last year, personally. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Well, I'd love for you to tell a little bit on what inspired you with baking. I mean, I know Michael's is a craft show and they have a baking section, but what was the transition from that to opening your own place? I'm sure that was a huge one.
It is that like that does seem I've always been super creative, so this was
Mhm.
kind of another one of those avenues for me.
Yeah.
But it actually started before I moved here. Random of all random, my youngest sister was getting married and she asked me to do her wedding cake, and I'd never done anything like that before, and I wasn't really that much of a baker, so I wasn't really sure why she asked me to do it, but I thought, okay. I was working at Michael's at the time in Minnesota. I was still at the store, and I just said, all right, well, I'm going to take a Wilton course and learn how to put a cake together, I guess. And it kind of all just grew from there. So, I mean, I did like her wedding cake, and I feel like I probably did a couple of other cakes while I was still living there, but I did enjoy it. But it was a lot. So after I ended up moving here and I took the job here at the Michaels, um, I just started doing every job that there was, and that included becoming the Wilton instructor. So I started teaching the classes myself, and it kind of just grew from that. So it all kind of exploded, and I really enjoyed teaching the classes and getting to kind of practice my techniques and everything for things for my friends and my
Hmm.
family. And um, I just really had a lot of fun with it. And at the time, I thought like I would really enjoy having a bakery, and there wasn't really anything like that around here at that time. And I kind of talked myself out of it because I just didn't know how to make it happen. And life moved on and I still kind of did it for friends and family, but I didn't really pursue anything more than that because I just didn't know how.
Hmm.
I just thought I have the know-how, but I don't have any money. So I don't know how to make it happen. So I kind of just let it go for a long time. And over the years, so when I left Michael's and then I had another job at a corporate office for a franchise owner for a restaurant here in town. And I, worked the admin side of a restaurant business. And I learned a lot there. I was there for several years and I got to the point where I was burnt out there.
Mm.
So just to shorten that story a lot. So I just decided I needed a break and I took a break and I Ubered for 8 months and that's all I did. And I just was like, I need to decompress
Yeah.
and not have anyone to answer to besides myself. And that was, I think, life changing for me. I don't know that I could go back to working for another person after working for myself.
Right.
I did for a short time in before COVID happened. I worked at a school on the other side of town for a while, but then I got laid off from that as well when they had budget cuts. So, but I feel like at every job that I've had, I learned something that's super critical to what I have to do every day here to run this business. I don't know that if I had tried to do it sooner, I
Right.
wouldn't have known all the things I needed to know. Not that I couldn't have learned them, but I
Yeah.
I feel like I needed everything that I've done before this to get here. And then
Hmm.
after I left the school, I did some volunteer work for a local charity as well, and I spent a few months doing that. And over the holiday season, I did a lot of baking, and I was bringing a lot of stuff in and all of that. And that's kind of where that conversation restarted. And they just said, is this something you really are passionate about? Is this something you really want to do? And I said, well, yeah, but I, I don't know how to make it happen. And they said, well, we're going to figure it out and we will find a way to make it happen. So it was a long year of figuring out how to budget things, how to buy all of like used equipment and everything I could do to just kind of piecemeal this together
Hmm.
just to get started. Um, but that's how it happened. Um,
Yeah.
I just learned that has kind of taught me don't wait. Don't wait because you don't know how.
Hmm.
Start putting things together, whatever you can, and don't be afraid to talk to people about it because you might be surprised. You'll come across the right person who is exactly the person you needed to talk to that's going to help you figure out how to make your dream come true. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. It's also super crazy for your first ever like real baking like was it project to be a wedding
Yeah.
cake? Like I know
Yes.
from like I've never made a
Yeah.
wedding cake for a reason. It's not the first thing you typically learn
And
how
it
to
wasn't
bake.
even just like a regular wedding cake. It was a three-tier topsy-turvy cake
Oh my gosh.
that I had like so I had the Wilton instructor on speed dial because I didn't get through enough classes. Like they don't
Oh
teach that in a class.
no.
She's like, if you need some help, just call me. I'll help you walk it. She helped me figure out like the structural engineering part of it so it wouldn't fall over. And I mean, I was like, I was honestly pretty impressed with myself how
You
that
should
came out, my
be.
very first cake. And I was like, oh wow, okay. I can actually do that.
Yeah. I mean, just in case anyone listening doesn't necessarily understand, I think you should, looking at like the physics and like the gravity
Mhm.
of it. But having like a tiered cake as your first cake is crazy to start off with. But like
Yeah.
the slants, you have to like make sure the dowels are in the right place and the
Yep.
weight and the size is like perfectly measured. Otherwise,
Thankfully, a
it's
big part
dead.
of it is kind of an optical illusion because you kind of cut out
Oh,
part of it, depending on how you put it together. But that's how
right.
she taught me to put that together. And I feel like for my first
Makes
one, I
sense.
wouldn't have wanted to do it any other way. But you cut the cake at an angle and you kind of create an inset so it's going to sit flat in there, but it looks like it's at this angle. So
Mm,
it was a little tricky, but
yeah.
it still was not. it was still hard.
Still hard, yeah. But that's awesome to hear. I was just actually talking about this literally the other day with my friend. It's like it's so interesting when you're going through like these hard moments, right, in your life, and you're like, I don't know what this is for. And then a few years down the road, you're able to look back and be like, okay, I understand what that was for, right?
Yeah,
Like my
yeah,
family owned a restaurant back up in Michigan. So when you talk about admin work, when you talk about those, I know exactly what you mean. It is hard,
yeah,
which it's so
it
hard.
is.
And but I learned so much from doing all that. Like towards the ending years, they closed it in 2019 just for retirement reasons, but I was able to learn so much about what it takes to run those businesses, which I'm sure was, although very hard to go through, I'm sure has helped so much with opening your own place. Like, okay, I
Yeah,
thankfully all of this I do know I don't have to go do trial and error for that, which is so much harder to do
yeah.
on your own. Um, so
Because
yeah.
the actual running of the business, like I've been in retail and management, I mean, for 20 years or more. So that part of it, like running the actual business was not
Mm-hmm.
intimidating to me,
Right.
but it was the back end, like, I don't know what kind of licenses and permits do I need? And like there's just so many T's to cross and I's to dot and like all of those things that I did even just the last 5 years before I opened, those were
Mm-hmm.
super critical to me, even having any clue where to even start with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how I would have figured it out otherwise.
Yeah. I
It would
know
have
a
taken
little.
me a lot longer.
Oh yeah, I do know just a little bit. I do know some people in Benel who have their own storefronts, and they were even telling me like Benel versus Palm Coast, which is like it's like I technically live in Palm Coast, but I'm right there next to the border of Benel.
Hmm.
Like I take a left turn or a right turn, and it says "Welcome to Benel." But it's like those little lines make so much difference, and you don't
They
realize
do.
that.
They
And then
do.
there's so much different paperwork. Oh my gosh, I did not know this.
There
We're
is.
neighbors, but there's a huge difference.
There is.
Um,
And that was a little bit of the deciding factor for where I was going to be located. And then, my budget was also a huge factor in that. I
sure.
mean, I was really starting with no money. Didn't take out a business loan. Like I was really just piecing this together as cheaply as possible. And I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to afford rent in a one of the newer Palm Coast strips. Or I mean, I can imagine I would do so much more business in Flagler Beach, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to pay the rent there. So at
Yeah.
least not at first. And I didn't have any savings to keep myself going while my business could catch up to the
Right.
expenses. So
Yeah.
I just knew I needed to start as small as possible, really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's awesome that you're able to figure these out. And like you said, a lot of the experience that you had and the way you're able to make those decisions is because of those past experiences you had with different jobs and different positions and all of those things that, we do in life. And it's kind of cool to see how it all places together as you start this new venture. Um, really quick before we wrap it up, you've been here a good amount of time down here in Palm Coast. I would consider you honestly a veteran. I feel like anyone over like 4 or 5 years is like a veteran at this point because there are so many new people, myself
yes,
included.
yeah.
But what are some of the things that you like to do in Palm Coast? Like, what would you recommend for the newbies in the area, whether they can edit groups or events or any places?
So, I mean, I'm a little bit of a homebody, so it's hard for me to really say, but
Sure.
I know that there have been times where I've just realized that I have allowed myself to become too isolated from people, and especially after COVID, like it's just so easy to just not interact with people anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's also not healthy for us. So it has been you kind of have to force yourself to join a group that holds
Mm-hmm.
events like Ladies of Flagler County or something like that. They do all kinds of events. You can make your own events. You could have 3 people, you could have 40 people, so you just don't know. But find a way to get yourself connected, whether that's through a Facebook group or a church or, just networking groups. There's so many networking groups in town too. And that was actually, I joined a networking group at the point where I was kind of working for the charity for a while before I opened. And that was kind of what helped give me the confidence to
Mm-hmm.
believe like I I could totally do this. Like I wasn't sure. I just wasn't confident enough to say that I could definitely do this. But when I was like, oh well, I have just like this little baking business, and they're like, you don't have a little baking business, you have a baking business, and I was like, you're right, I totally have one. So it's really good to get connected with those groups because they can really reflect back to you what they see when they see what you're doing. And you might not think it's a big deal, but other people will. So I think it's really just important to find ways
Yeah.
to connect out there.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up the homebody aspect because that's I know that's a huge intimidating factor when you're new to an area. You're like, well, it's easier to stay indoors, and I know that's what I love to do all the time. Um, but it's really great, like you mentioned, there are so many good networking events and just groups. I think a lot of women groups. That's a very new surge, in my opinion, especially,
Yes,
but there are so many great ones down here in Flagler.
there are.
Um, that you
And
can
I just
go.
started
Mhm.
saying, you know what? I I don't want to go, but I just force myself to start saying yes. You want to do this? This is happening? Yes, I'm going to do that. You want to go on this trip? Yes, I'm doing that. Oh, this is happening. You want to help us with that? Yes, I'm doing that. So it sometimes you just have to make yourself do it. You're way outside your comfort zone, but it's important. It's
Yeah,
important.
same. I'm the exact same way, but it's been really fun. There are so many different people that you get to meet there. And
Mhm.
then so many people, I mean, baking sweet shops, it's not shouldn't be a hard sell for people. We
No.
all deserve something nice in our lives. Well, Becca, thank you so much for the time
Yeah,
today. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. Like I
you're
said, baking
welcome.
is like my favorite topic ever. So it's always a real treat when I get to interview bakers on the show and I get to kind of geek out a little bit. So again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone listening. I appreciate your time, and I will see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.